Good afternoon to all our members and our guests, and of course welcome to the Rural Press Club of Victoria's June Luncheon with Premier Daniel Andrews. My name's Bryce Eichschild. I'm the President of the Rural Press Club of Victoria and also a journalist with Stock and Land. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to all First Nations people in the room today. I'd also like to acknowledge our sponsors of the club today, very important part of our club. Without them we would not be here today. They include Telstra and Agriculture Victoria, and our silver sponsors, Marcus Oldham College, the Transport Accident Commission, Curry Communications, the Victorian Farmers Federation, the Weekly Times and the Stock and Land, and we thank them for their ongoing support. I'd also like to thank committee members of the RPCV today who have given many volunteer hours to put on today's event. We are all volunteers, in particular two ladies sitting down the front here, Laura, Jade and Nicole Cairns. Without them, this event would not be on today. Over the last 2 years, the club has held numerous webinars, which is the case for many organisations in the wake of COVID-19, including our annual Journalism and Photography Awards night, which was held virtually in 2020 and 2021 respectively. The club is pleased to have commenced a series of in-person and networking opportunities and industry events, and for the first time will move its annual Journalism and Photography Awards night back to regional Victoria, and that really aligns with our core values about supporting regional and rural tourism businesses and, of course, the people that we represent, people who work in regional media. We plan to call for entries from journalists and photographers, so those who are in here and in the press today, we will be putting out nominations shortly for those awards, so please keep an eye out for that. And if you enjoy today's event, I'd really encourage you to join the Rural Press Club of Victoria, regardless if you're a photographer or a journalist. It's a great way to support rural and regional media. Of course, my sincere thanks goes to Premier Daniel Andrews, who has agreed to join us here today. Please put your hands together for the Premier. And if you've been following the news today, you would know that a number of ministers have fallen to COVID today. We were expecting a couple more, but it's also wonderful to have the Agriculture Minister today here, Gail Turney, and I'm not too sure where Gail is, down on the front table. Thank you so much, Gail. Only in the ministry for about 22 hours we've just worked out on our table, so a big round of applause for Gail as well. Without any further ado, that's it for me, and I'll introduce the MC for today, Bridget Rollason. Bridget is a Victorian state political reporter for ABC News based here in Melbourne. She joined the ABC in 2017 in Ballarat after working in commercial television in Albury and Canberra. Bridget, which is a very, I suppose, important part of why we have her as the MC today, was the club's 2018 Ray Frawley Young Journalist of the Year and was awarded a Melbourne Press Club Quill for radio news last year. Born and raised in Maryborough, Bridget is passionate about regional journalism and, of course, regional Victoria, which is what we're here to celebrate today. So please put your hands together for Bridget Rollason.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's lunch with the Premier Daniel Andrews. Like the Premier, I've spent a lot of my life in regional Victoria and it's an honour to be your host today. There's been just a little bit happening in state politics in the past week, so thanks so much to the Premier for being here during this busy time. Daniel Andrews grew up in a small business household and went to high school in Wangaratta. He moved to Melbourne in 1990 and went to Monash University. While he was studying, he drove trucks, sold hot dogs and worked in a bottle shop, so no wonder you were reaching for the top shelf during the pandemic. Daniel Andrews has joined the Labor Party in 1993, working for his local MP in the southeastern suburbs before becoming the Labor Party's Assistant State Secretary. He entered Parliament 11 years later as the member for Mulgrave and was appointed to Cabinet in 2006. He was the Minister for Consumer Affairs and Gaming and then became the Health Minister in 2007. As Health Minister, Daniel developed the landmark Victorian Cancer Action Plan, and funded the state's first comprehensive cancer centre. A photo of the new Royal Children's Hospital still hangs on his wall, the $1 billion world-class facility, and a proud achievement of his time in office. In 2010, Daniel became the leader of the opposition, and in 2014 was sworn in as Victoria's 48th Premier. While family comes first, Daniel is interested in history and is a self-described golf tragic. Daniel met his wife Catherine at Monash University's Mannix College. They married in 1998 and they live in Mulgrave with their 3 children, Noah, Grace and Joseph. So I welcome the Premier Daniel Andrews.
Thanks very much, Bridget, and ladies and gentlemen, for that very warm welcome. Can I begin my remarks by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my deep personal respects to elders past and present, and I do that with a sense of great pride, as I hope all Victorians do, that just last week we've taken the most profound, the most tangible and meaningful steps towards truth, justice and treaty with First Nations Victorians. Victoria is always at its best when it leads our nation, and when it comes to reconciliation, self-determination and treaty, that's exactly what Victorians are doing. I'm very pleased to... Yes, absolutely. Can I acknowledge, of course, Bryce Eishold, and I won't read anything into the fact that Bryce has done a nice thank you to me before I spoke. Let's hope there's a similar thank you at the end. I'm sure there will be. Bryce and I have just been talking about Erica, where he calls home, beautiful part of Gippsland, -1 this morning, Bryce, was that right? Yeah, it's always good to talk to people who love regional Victoria just as I do. I am shaped by where I grew up in the northeast. Bridget and I have just been talking about, we've been trading stories about how upset mums are about not visiting as often as we should. But it is a great pleasure to be here today, and I want to thank you for your very kind invitation. Last week, one of my staff sheepishly came to me and said, look, you might not be able to do that event because we've got, there's a few things on at the moment. And I said, no, we will make it happen, and I'm delighted to be here. Gail Tierney, my good friend and a long-standing colleague who's had responsibility for TAFE and training and higher education. I think many of you would know her in the quite outstanding job that she's done in saving TAFE, rebuilding TAFE, and now making it free, making it better than it's ever been. And we know that that's so important in regional communities. But the skills you need for the job you want, and I'm sure in questions we might talk about some of those labour shortages, some of those visa challenges we've got at the moment. Gail's done simply an outstanding job in terms of those portfolios, and that's why I didn't hesitate, given the necessity to reshuffle the cabinet and swear in some new ministers just the last few days, to appoint her as the Agriculture Minister. She's from regional Victoria. She knows and understands that without a strong agriculture sector and without strong regions, our state can never be truly successful. So she's going to do an equally outstanding job in her new portfolio as well. Danielle Green, Parliamentary Secretary, is here today as well, and I want to acknowledge her, someone else who's, while she represents, like I do, an outer suburban electorate, she's from regional Victoria, knows and understands it well, and spends so much of her time and her hard work making sure that our government, in all of its different, in every different way, we understand just how important the priorities of regional Victoria are. Now, before I talk about regional Victoria more specifically, I wanted to talk about you a little bit, because not only am I grateful for the kind invitation to be here today, but it's important to acknowledge that you've not been able to come together, as all of us have not been able to come together for such a long time. A lunch like this was, well, it's been a long time since we were able to come together in person, and that's really important to connect and to talk about all those things that we can be proud of, I think, as a very much united Victorian community, one that stuck together, one that looked out for each other, one that put its faith in science and medical advice, and one that has been stronger for it. A lot of pain, a lot of challenge over these last couple of years, but Victoria's been through so much and done so well, and that should be a source of pride for every single Victorian. I want to acknowledge that the job of a regional journo has, in some respects, well, it's never been an easy one, but today I think the challenges are greater than they've been for some time, and it's important that we make that acknowledgement. Local content's getting harder and harder to produce, resources are being stretched further than ever before, bulletins are increasingly centralised and indeed statewide, national even in some contexts. But as fire raged as communities were flooded, as the pandemic took hold, each of you were there. And for that, I am truly grateful. You shared stories and raised voices on behalf of your communities, families, and indeed vulnerable Victorians. You got the message out day after day after day, and you did your jobs under such extreme pressure. During the pandemic, it was important to me and my team that regional papers particularly could get on with the job of keeping their communities informed, telling those critical local stories. That's why we stepped in and delivered a stream of COVID advertising when ad bookings from local businesses had obviously dried up. In total, more than $20 million in support to over 200 regional papers. Revenue that I know, because so many in the sector have sought me out to tell me this, revenue that kept staff on at local papers so that communities could get that information, those critically local stories that they needed, not just for their emotional and their mental health well-being, if you like, but also critically important information about how to stay safe. We were also very pleased recently to announce that we will continue that spend right through until the end of this year. As a government, we also recently made announcements, some $2.7 million in funding boost over 3 years to support AAP to continue their work. It's a vital service that I know so many regional media players, no matter the medium, fundamentally rely on. So it was very important to us to see AAP's future secured. A strong AAP means that regional papers can focus on delivering regional content, local content, for their communities. But still, I know, and I want to make very clear to you that I appreciate that this is not an easy time now, even as we see the worst of the pandemic behind us. It's still not an easy time for regional journalists, and I want to take a moment to thank again each and every one of you for the remarkable dedication, professionalism, that wisdom, the care, that real sense of, that real local. That's what it's about, being grounded in your community and being a champion for your community, raising issues and getting information out. It's so important. It seems odd, but perhaps I should just ask you to give yourselves a big round of applause. Speaking of regional Victoria today, it's very exciting to think that more and more people are choosing to live and work outside of Melbourne, more than ever before. And that sea change, tree change, flexibility in working arrangements, all of those different factors they were real and they were there before the pandemic, but perhaps the pandemic has brought that to a head. That's a great opportunity for regional Victoria. It's a challenge as well, but with hard work and with partnerships and by listening and appreciating and understanding the local perspective, I think we can turn those challenges into really profound opportunities for the future. It is with a real sense of pride and a swift acknowledgement of partnership. It's not the government that creates every job, but we should all be very, very proud to think that regional Victoria has the second lowest regional unemployment rate at 3.5% in the entire nation. Let's hope we can get it lower again. And of course, across the state, 3.7% unemployment. That is, I don't think anyone could have dreamed of a number like that. I never talk about full employment economy. That's what the economists talk about. We'll always fight hard for every extra job because they're really very, very important. But that shows the underlying strength of regional Victoria and the underlying strength of the Victorian economy more broadly. There's lots of different ways to measure that. If I could share just a few of those metrics. Nearly 30% of Australia's total food and fibre exports are being grown and produced right here in our state. Our regions are worth over $85 billion to the state's economy each and every year. Regional Victoria is a powerhouse in its own right. It's driving our state's economy. It is central to propelling our economic recovery. And as I said before, without strong regions, without every part of regional and rural Victoria being strongly supported, growing, thriving, being secure and safe and optimistic and confident about the future, then our state gets held back. It's as simple as that. You can't have a strong Victoria if you don't have strong regions. Now, as Bridget alluded to, and I think Bryce as well, before I talk about a few investments in our regions, I did want to just make a couple of comments about the reshuffle. I had a number of senior colleagues, dear friends, who, after a lot of thought with family and lots of discussions, they made the very difficult decision to not recontest the election at the end of the year. And a couple of them have been around for 20 years, some a little bit less than that, but people who have served their state so well and made a difficult decision, and the fact that it was difficult for them speaks to the fact that they are motivated as much by service as they are by their own personal circumstances. But as a result of those changes, and there's been statements issued and lots of things said acknowledging their hard work and the decisions that have been made, I am very pleased to acknowledge that, of course, Mary Ann Thomas, regional Member of Parliament from Macedon, lives in Kyneton, who has done such an outstanding job as a Minister for Regional Development and Agriculture since 2020. Mary Ann has moved across to the Health and Ambulance Services portfolio. And we know and understand how important health services are the further you get away from Melbourne. They're pretty important in Melbourne too, but they are, I think, extra important because health not only is about your well-being and the well-being of your family, hospitals are also perhaps the biggest non-rainfall dependent employer in most regional towns and regional cities. So they play that dual role. Mary Ann understands health, having been the Parliamentary Secretary previously, having been the Cabinet Secretary, having been in Cabinet these last couple of years. She's going to do an outstanding job in health, and she'll make sure that regional Victoria gets a fair share and is always relevant to any of the considerations that we make. I'm also very pleased to welcome Harriet Shing, member for Eastern Victoria, so she knows and understands Erica and other communities like that very well. Harriet can't be here today because she has COVID, but she's joining the Cabinet as the Minister for Water and the Minister for Regional Development and the Minister for Equality as well. She's a great champion for regional Victoria, and she'll do an outstanding job as well. She's been in the Parliament since 2014, and I can tell you there's no stronger voice for regional Victoria than Harriet. Now, Gail is here. I've already spoken about Gail, and just if she is half as good in agriculture as she's been in TAFE and skills and training, then agriculture's in very safe hands, I think, from a state government administration point of view. She's going to do an outstanding job. Now, if I can reflect a little bit about the journey, where we've been, some of the things we've done, because it does set us up for the future and it does speak, I think, to the values that our government has, and certainly the values that I carry with me every day, having grown up in regional Victoria, and of course knowing and understanding that you should never forget where you come from. I'm really proud to be able to say that over our time in office, we've spent some $36 billion in regional Victoria. Not a cost to budget, it's an investment, a profound investment in making sure that our regions are strong. That is, not to make a partisan point, it's just a fact, that is 5 times more than the government that we defeated and replaced back in 2014. Those investments have supported the creation of some 80,000 jobs across regional Victoria since 2014. Those numbers represent far more, though, than just a figure or a number or a line in a media release. That's thousands of opportunities, that's thousands of futures secured, that's thousands of people with much brighter prospects for the future. As I said, there are lots of different metrics, and you can't ever have a conversation with anybody from regional Victoria without talking about regional roads. I understand that, I get it. I've spent as much time as any Premier driving on regional roads growing up and since. But we've delivered 6,800 kilometres of better and safer local roads. We have invested $3 billion in our agriculture sector since 2014, investments that have seen that industry grow, that critically important and especially diverse industry, grow by some 32% just in that time. We've delivered thousands of new social and affordable housing units. Our big build, 25% of that is spent in regional Victoria, and that'll help deal with some of the pressure, and I know there is significant pressure both in the rental market and the property market more broadly, right across regional Victoria, not just on price but on supply, which in some respects are kind of the same issue. It is great to have a federal government with a social and affordable housing agenda as well now, and we do look forward to partnering with them to do even more, to build even more units to deal with that challenge. Of course, new schools and upgraded classrooms in every corner of the state have been a priority for us. A good quality education for every single regional young person who wants that is critically important to the life opportunities that they will enjoy. World-class hospitals, I've spoken a little bit about health, but making sure that less and less people need to travel away from the community that they've helped to build to get the care that they need. As someone whose family is from regional Victoria, I know and understand how challenging it is to have a loved one have to travel away from the farm, away from home, to get the care that they need. That is very, very disruptive. It's not avoidable in every case. Sometimes that's the way the system will have to be structured, but it's also about trying to minimise that as much as we possibly can. And that's why we roll out capital upgrades, new equipment, workforce initiatives to do more locally for more locals. It is simple, but it is so important, profound in fact, in terms of health outcomes. Our regional partnership model, and all of you will be well acquainted with our regional partnerships that we've set up some time ago, is making the most of local knowledge. Often when I speak at regional partnerships forums, I make the point off the top that locals know best, and they do. You understand the communities that you live in and that you serve, especially well, given that you are their voice, but local communities know and understand what they need and how best to tackle challenges. And whilst there are some statewide considerations in lots of areas, that local perspective is precious and it's worth a lot and has always been valued by us. It's why that regional partnership model is about investing in that, formalising it and helping government get that direct feed, if you like, on what matters in a local community. To give you a couple of examples, the Mallee Regional Partnership helped advocate for the establishment of the Victorian Cross-Border Commissioner to try and make sure that rules and regulations at the borders are as seamless, are as simple, are as easy as they can be. The Barwon Regional Partnership has helped drive the Geelong City deal, now worth over $500 million, with about $260 million of that provided by our government. The Great South Coast Partnership delivered $17.4 million in last year's budget for the Portland Diversification Plan. All of these things, very local, some lots of money, some less, but they all make a really important difference. We've also invested beyond those partnerships in an additional $30 million in the Regional Jobs and Infrastructure Fund, bringing our total investment to more than $700 million since 2015. In total, that fund has supported more than 1,000 different projects, right across regional Victoria, helping to create or retain some 131,000 jobs. That's meaningful. That's 131,000 families, livelihoods, and the communities who are pegged against that. That is really, really significant, and we're very pleased to have done that. And we've done it in partnership, and it's so much stronger for that. The last two rounds of RGIF, the Regional Jobs and Infrastructure Fund alone, supported 52 projects, generating about $130 million in project expenditure. That's money that's moving around regional economies, supporting lots and lots of other jobs beyond the principal employment to do with that particular project. There are many who talk about their investments and talk about what they will do. Ultimately, we are getting this done. And I'm deeply grateful to each and every one of you and every community who is our partner in this, making sure we understand, making sure we tap into that precious local knowledge and making sure that we make the very best decisions for the future. That's what matters. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about mental health now, if I can, because we have, over a very long period of time, and most recently through the pressure and the challenge, and the anxiety and the grief of the pandemic event, we've seen that we were right to announce as part of the last election and to call time on a broken system, to acknowledge that the system all too often makes things worse, not better, for those at their lowest point. We announced that Royal Commission. We said that we would implement every single one of its recommendations. Despite the pandemic, the Royal Commission under Penny Armitage's leadership got that job done, and I'm proud to report to you today that 90% of those recommendations, work has begun on those. It's about changing lives and saving lives. It's about making sure that, particularly for regional communities, help is not so far away as to be unavailable. We need to do more in communities, and we are rolling out youth services, family services, acute beds, that missing middle that our health experts talk about, where you either get good care when you have relatively low needs from a GP, or you get very acute care when you have not received that ongoing support and you've had to become almost critically ill and in crisis in order to access the service system. That middle, which is about keeping people well, has never been a priority. It is now, and we are delivering across the board to make sure that the system, if you can call it a system, it is really a set of disparate services at the moment. But we are connecting those, we are adding to that, and that's a particular focus and a particular priority for regional Victoria. And I know, and I'm very proud to think, that we've taken such big steps. And I do want to acknowledge outgoing Deputy Premier and Minister for Mental Health, James Merlino, for his leadership in these areas. Just last Thursday in the Parliament, he introduced the most profound rewrite of our Mental Health and Wellbeing Act in the history of our state, and leading our nation, again, Victoria, at its best. I'll give you a couple of examples of what this focus on building a better mental health system from the ground up, in partnership with our workforce and, most importantly, those people in our Victorian community who have that lived experience. 1 in 5 of us will deal with a mental health challenge during our life, but 5 in 5 of us have an interest in getting this right and listening to those who have that lived experience. They must be at the centre of the work that we're doing. Just quickly, a couple of examples. We are replacing and expanding the mental health facility at Golden Valley Health in Shepparton. We're delivering additional acute mental health beds in Ballarat and in my old hometown of Wangaratta. We're building new alcohol and drug crisis hubs in Latrobe Regional Hospital, with planning for future hubs in Ballarat, Bendigo and Shepparton, all the way through to Mildura. Additional work to support those who are gripped by these sorts of addiction issues that are so challenging. We're putting trained mental health specialists in every government secondary school, and that includes, of course, secondary schools in regional Victoria. We're providing specialist support for Victorians with eating disorders across Ballarat, Barwon, Bendigo and the Latrobe regions, so that they don't have to travel to Melbourne to get the care that they need. Shouldn't be a situation where you have to wait till you're in crisis before there's a service that meets your needs. Moving now quickly to another issue that I know is critically important for every Victorian, but particularly in regional and rural Victoria. Early childhood education. I made some very significant announcements alongside my colleague and friend Don Perrottet, the Premier of New South Wales, just a couple of weeks ago. The Best Start, Best Life initiative will make kinder for all 3-year-olds and all 4-year-olds free from next year. Zero cost to families. That is saving thousands of dollars for mums and dads who've got 3- and 4-year-old kids. We're also doubling the number of hours for 4-year-old kinder and turning it into a pre-prep year. Fully 30 hours of play-based learning, free of charge, for every 4-year-old in every part of our state. Nothing is more significant in allowing particularly women to, if they choose to work more hours, to go back to work, and not so much work for the Australian Taxation Office, but to work for themselves. Not lose money in going back doing an extra day, but make money to help them and their kids and their family have a more secure future. Also needs thousands of people to construct classrooms and thousands of additional early educators. So this is great for cost of living, fantastic for brain development for our smallest Victorians and the life opportunities that they'll have down the track when they're workers, when they've got the skills, the critical thinking skills that the economy will demand of them now and certainly in 20, 25 years' time. Also fantastic for female economic power, having what is absolutely it's not a privilege, it is a right to participate to the fullest extent that you choose, to not have barriers in your way, and it's really good for the economy as well. It's exactly what needs to be done. It's a big reform. It's $9 billion over 10 years, but I think it is worth doing. It's absolutely worth doing, and we are doing pretty well the same thing across the 2 biggest economies and the 2 biggest states in our nation. Just before I leave early childhood education, there's one extra element where we've gone a bit further than New South Wales. We know and understand that what the Mitchell Institute calls childcare deserts, they exist right across the board. This is not about early childhood education, this is about childcare. It is in many regional communities, there is either no childcare provider, or if there is, it's full, and there's no opportunity to get the hours that you might need for your household budget, for your career, for your advancement, for your sense of security. That's why we're going to build 50 brand new high-quality, low-cost, state government-run childcare centres. We're setting up a task force to consult and work through where they will go, but they will be pretty well break-even, so they'll be cheaper, they'll be available, they'll be to the highest standards, and they'll deal with where the market has failed, where the market has clearly failed to provide what families and communities and the economy desperately needs. We look forward to being able to update you on that as that work is done. Now, again, quickly, because we do want to leave some time for questions at the end, the Commonwealth Games are going to be such an amazing boost for regional Victoria. When we first got an inkling that we had a chance to secure this event, I made it clear to a number of colleagues that we weren't going to do a rerun of 2006. There was no point doing that. We've done that, we did it very well. We weren't interested in just doing that again. We had to find a way to do something that was unique. So we've come up with a plan to do the first multi-city Commonwealth Games ever and to have the event, apart from the opening ceremony, exclusively in regional Victoria. This is all about showcasing regional Victoria, undoubtedly the most beautiful part of regional Australia, to the rest of the world. The visitation, the infrastructure, the employment and the legacy will be so significant. There'll be a big cultural program that sits alongside this, so it's not just about sport, as important as that is, but it will be about that showcase, unashamedly boasting and bragging about how good regional Victoria is, and I think that that will be worth so much as we go to the future. I made some changes to ministerial arrangements to Sinna Allen as proud regional Victorian, member for Bendigo East, someone who is so passionate about regional Victoria, just become the Deputy Premier. First time on our side of politics that we've had, in my memory, someone from regional Victoria, and only the second woman in the history of our state to have that office. She's going to be in charge of delivering the Commonwealth Games. And Sean Lean, who some of you may know, he's a Metro MP, but he's been the Minister for Local Government most recently, so I'm sure he's been through lots of different regional communities over his time in Cabinet. He's going to become the Minister for Commonwealth Games Legacy. So that's all about making sure that these investments, this $2.6 billion and potentially more, has a lasting benefit for the regional communities that it will come to, and all of those other regional communities that will feed in to running what I'm sure will be the most successful and indeed unique Commonwealth Games that have ever been run. Those are the 4 hubs, which will all have villages, all have competition-grade infrastructure, and all the other benefits. Not to say that excludes other parts of regional Victoria. We've got many announcements to make about how this benefits everybody, but they of course are at Geelong, Bendigo, Ballarat and Gippsland, and there will be, as I said, very significant benefits for every part of regional Victoria out of this event. So, friends, if I can just finish by saying, no matter how tough it gets, whether it's drought or flood, terrible bushfires, or a 1 in 100 year global pandemic, you always find a way to make sure that local communities have a voice, that decision makers like me and my team and so many others know and understand what local communities want and need, what they aspire for, what they're concerned about, what they want to see supported, what they want to see changed. That's invaluable. That's precious to me. Bridget can tell you, because we spend lots of time together at different press conferences, I've always been a fan of more voices in the media, not less. It doesn't mean that every voice in the media agrees with me or I agree with them, but that's a healthy thing. And we did face quite a challenge. A couple of years ago, I think we would have had many fewer voices in media if we had not done as we were asked to do by the club, by so many others, to step in and supplement that income, but also use the platform that you've created over generations to get a trusted voice, a trusted message out to communities about their safety, about looking out for each other, and now about recovering and being stronger for this event, as challenging and as difficult as it has been. We'll always respect the work that you do. We'll always partner with you in lots of innovative ways, and we'll always be, I think, a better government for the work that you do in making sure that we understand what the communities you serve need and aspire to. Again, thank you for your kind invitation to be here today.
Thanks so much, Premier. Now, just before we go to questions, I will quickly run through some of the House rules. So working members of the press will be given priority to ask questions. Those asking questions must introduce themselves and the organisation and media that they represent. Make sure you have a question rather than a statement. One question per person, and if you could keep your questions and answers brief, that would be much appreciated. So who would like to go first?
Good afternoon, Premier. Karen Percy, formerly of the ABC, currently a freelance journalist. I'm actually wearing my Media, Entertainment and Arts Alliance hat right now. I'm the media president for my sins. I really commend you and your government for the money you've put into regional journalism, making it sustainable. I also really appreciate that you've acknowledged the serious stresses that our journalists are under. I wonder if I might ask another thing of you in a year of election promises, and that is one of the frustrations our members talk to us about is being able to get access to ministers, being able to get access to department heads, to be able to get information, meaningful information that comes back. You send an email, you send very detailed questions, you get very little back. We have, I think, a pretty poor state of press freedom in Australia more generally, and I wonder, when you look at suppressions, you look at a whole lot of things, and it's particularly acute in the regions. So I wonder, a government of yours that wants to lead, that says it's progressive, whether the reset we've seen in your cabinet might also lead to a reset in press freedom, accountability and transparency in this state for journalists and the media ecosystem. Thanks so much.
Those departmental heads will be so upset to hear that you're critical of them. But look, I'm more than happy to make sure that I remind all my colleagues that an important part of their job is to be accountable, of course. I don't think they need much reminding of that, but I'll do it, and I'll make sure that they understand that you ask questions for the best of reasons. You want to get information out to the people that you serve, and communities rightly have expectations. I don't know that I necessarily agree with the notion that the people are not responsive, but I'm happy to have a conversation with you at another time. Absolutely. Ultimately, there's a bit of tension. There always is. That's not a bad thing, provided that we respect each other and we respect the work that each of us do. And I'd say to you, and I'd hope, and I'm not here to, it's not about currying favour, it's just a fact, and we were proud to do it, and that's why I say we were proud to do it. There was a moment when, if you were not about scrutiny, if you were not about accountability, if you didn't value the work that you do and the pressure and the tension you put on us and some of the tension you cause, well then we wouldn't have come up with extra advertising, would we? We would have said, oh well, that'll be a whole lot less voices, a whole lot less people critical of us. Some might have made that choice. I can actually think of one particular former Premier who might have made that choice. We didn't make that choice because we want more voices, not less. But if there's access issues, absolutely. We'll have a conversation. We won't be able to do it today, but you can ring me and I'll go through it with you. And if there's things we can do about that, always happy to. Always.
Thanks, Karen. Who would like to go next?
Premier. Alex Sinnott from the Weekly Times. How's things? New federal government, new opportunities. Do you see the potential for federal-state partnerships on rail, road infrastructure? I know there's been talk in metropolitan Melbourne. Do you see any regional priorities in terms of transport or more broadly in health and education?
Thanks, Alex. I think there's a great sense of optimism. And again, I haven't come here today to reflect upon a defeated federal government, and that you'd expect me to be happy about that, but I'm not going to go into that. That doesn't serve any real purpose. I got along okay with Morrison. I worked well with him when we needed to, and I would have liked to have done more with him. There was no shortage of ideas that we put forward that weren't necessarily supported. But what I'd say on the new government, I've known the Prime Minister for 25 years. We shared a flat together for a period of time. He is a good person. He's a person of real urgency. He wants to get things done. He's not just about defeating his opponent and occupying the office. He wants to get things done. It might be one of the reasons why we're good mates, because that's the same culture that I have and that I've given, made it very clear, all my colleagues know and understand. We're not here just to occupy the show. We want to get stuff done. I think there's a great opportunity for us to do some really important things together. Now, I'm not here to make announcements for them. There was a signature infrastructure project in metropolitan Melbourne. There were some other announcements they made. But be in no doubt, we have a long list because we have been ripped off for far too long. Victoria has not got its fair share, and it wasn't for lack of trying, and it wasn't for lack of quality projects. They were all there to be funded, and we weren't even asking for half. Any contribution's better than none. There's hundreds of thousands of Victorians who are in work today because of the infrastructure agenda we have, and it is in regional Victoria and in Metro Melbourne. Every regional passenger rail line, rolling stock, hospitals and schools, and I could have gone. I didn't talk about, $600 million at Ballarat and 500 odd at Bendigo, and LRH is being upgraded, Warrnambool's being upgraded. The list goes on and on. There's lots and lots of stuff happening, and that's really good. That's why we've done 5 times more than the people we took over from. And well in excess of 25%, just quietly. So, with that record, you can, with credibility, go to a new government and say, look, we're doing so much, can you please work with us? I've already been able to, but I'd like to think that Victoria was listened to very acutely when it came to 50-50 health funding, and we've got that extended out till the end of the year. We're going to do some work, and Victoria's leading the work on how we can better integrate GPs and hospitals. Not necessarily spending more money, just spending it better and getting people the care that they need. That's a long way, Alex, of saying I am very hopeful. When you think about Anthony's time as Infrastructure Minister, I don't think anyone would criticise, and perhaps they agree with me, he was perhaps Australia's most outstanding Infrastructure Minister when he had that portfolio. Now, as the PM, I think that he's up for building things, and he knows where Victoria is, and I'm very, very confident that we'll get some partnerships. And it's not always billions of dollars, sometimes it's smaller things, but they make a massive difference in a local community, particularly when you procure properly, when you give local supply chains, local subbies, all those people that Gail's putting through local regional TAFEs, when they've got work to do and security, that's when communities thrive. That's when kids don't think they have to go away, because they've got a future in the community that they've helped to build. So yeah, I am very, very confident. I could do a whole lot of announcements here, and you'd all help me, wouldn't you, to lobby the federal government, but yeah, we're working very, very closely with them, and I'm confident that we're going to get a much fairer share than we have.
Thanks, Alex. Up the back.
Thanks, Premier. Jeanette Severs, as you know, freelance journalist working across a range of national mastheads. Look, just personally, I have to say I'm always grateful for the amount of information I get through the government and the opposition whenever I contact your officers, and particularly during our bushfires. Thank you very much for your office being at my beck and call, essentially, because that's what we needed to work with. So, on to my questions. As I'm glad you've pointed out that Victoria is worth 29% of agricultural value production. As you know, New South Wales is working quite rapidly, investing in growing their sector to become producing 30% of Australia's agricultural value. At the moment, as you've pointed out, Victoria actually is leading that, and I'm sure all Victorian farmers that are sitting in this room would like to see Victoria achieve more than 30%, so that New South Wales continues to follow in our dust trail, so to speak. To do that, I'd actually got a few questions here, but they're all around the same thing. As you know, and no disrespect to Gail or Jacqueline or Marianne or Jala, but we've had 4 agricultural ministers since 2014. We've had 3 in the last 3 years, or just over 3 years. And can you do something about providing farmers with some stability in that ministerial portfolio, please? Because the minister, as far as the voters and farmers are concerned, is their conduit to holding the department accountable and representing what they want to achieve, rather than the bureaucrats telling the farmers what they should be doing. So I'd like to hear from you that come the end of this year, and given that you're likely to be re-elected, that there will be stability in that role going forward. Also, from the perspective of transport...
Just ask one question.
Okay, thank you.
Firstly, Jeanette, thank you for your kind appraisal of the office during those bushfires. That does seem it's very much. It'll be on the shoulders of those people right now as we speak who are still recovering from that. But it does, for the rest of us, seem a very long time ago. given what's occurred in between. But thank you for that. That's very kind, and I'll make sure that my staff know that you're appreciative of that. In terms of being likely to win, I have to pull you up there. I'm sorry. I have never taken an election for granted ever, and I'm not going to start now. Elections are won by a handful of votes in a handful of seats. And I know it's a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. Across the whole state, 40, 50, 60,000 people do a different thing, and you've got a different government. And we don't get the sort of investments that I've been talking about here, and so many more. We go back to cuts and closures and privatisations and all of those sorts of things. But that's not my choice. That's a choice for the community to make. My obligation is to put a positive and optimistic plan before the community, and that's what we'll do. And between now and polling day, work as hard as we can to do the stuff we said we would do. From time to time, ministerial arrangements change. It was, for instance, we've had a spate in federal politics recently of a new Prime Minister every 15 minutes or so. I hope that Anthony brings an end to that, and I'll do my very best to give you the continuity that you want. But each and every one, and I pick up on your note at your point about no disrespect, they're all outstanding women, outstanding ministers. And Gail, because of it's a big matrix, obviously, new people coming in, and I didn't want necessarily a brand new minister to be doing that job again. I wanted someone who had the experience that Gail has, being from regional Victoria, having done such a great job in TAFE, and so many of agriculture's challenges are about skills. Do you have the right people? The other point I'd make to you is changes aren't always a bad thing. I'm thrilled that the Treasurer, arguably one of the most senior people in the Parliament, not just in our government, given his experience, given his background, longest serving Labor Treasurer, I think, if he hasn't got that record yet, he's pretty close to it. Picking up trade is really important. So we'll put that right at the centre of the government because we know that exports are so important for the future as well. So not only will we try and give you some... I'm all for continuity, you can imagine that. But beyond that, we'll try and always make sure that we give you good people who know and understand how important regional Victoria is and are your champion, and particularly Ag's champion, because we know that without a strong agriculture sector, the Victorian economy cannot be strong. It simply can't be. On the point of accessibility, I know you had other questions. I've already introduced you to Jamila, who's sitting down here, as my press secretary. If you get them to her, we'll get you some responses.
Thanks, Jeanette. Callum?
Hi, Premier. Thanks for the money. I'm from Mayor P, by the way. You touched on health in your speech. There's obviously a lot of focus on the state of the healthcare system in regional Victoria at the moment, and especially on the shortage of staff. The opposition are promising to build several new hospitals in Albury, Wodonga, Mildura and Warragul as well if they win the election. Will you match those commitments, and is the solution as simple as that?
Well, not from this podium, I won't, Callum, no. And again, I didn't come here today to talk about our opponents, certainly not in any great detail, but I will just make this point, because it's not a partisan point, it is in fact the history of our state. Many hospitals were closed by the other side of politics. Many very deep cuts were made by the other side of politics. Many hospitals were privatised, and more was set to be privatised, if not for particularly regional Victoria standing up to the then Premier and electing a new Premier in Steve Bracks. And the privatisations weren't just in the bush, they were in regional Victoria, they were in Metro Melbourne as well. I'm very proud to think that we've returned Mildura Hospital back to public hands, and I just say to the people of Mildura, how could you possibly trust the people who sold your hospital off to make it a for-profit hospital, not a for-patients hospital, when they promised that they're going to rebuild it? I think the people of Mildura they're a lot more savvy than that, just quietly. When it comes to other commitments, then the other side might not have sold those hospitals, but they didn't build too many new ones. Like I remember LRH, which we're currently upgrading. There's been so many stages, and I've been honoured to be involved in so many of them in the different roles I've had. Bringing regional cancer there, linear accelerators, so radiotherapies there, bringing all manner of different services to Latrobe Valley. And the Gippsland more broadly by that wonderful hospital. That was a privatised hospital, and they couldn't make it pay because hospital care should not be about profit, and they literally threw the keys back to us And we said, OK, thank you, and we've upgraded it and we've made it better than it's ever been. So people's records matter. People's records matter. In terms of the broader health system, I would, if there's an opportunity, I take this every time I can, even if there isn't one, I try and create one. Today and every day, we should thank our nurses, our ambos, our doctors, the cooks, the cleaners, the ward clerks, the car park attendants, everyone in our health system. They are right now doing it very, very tough because many of their colleagues can't be by their side working. Just yesterday, 1,547 staff across our health system were unavailable for work. There were 150 ambulance Victoria paramedics that were unavailable for work. They are sometimes described as heroes. I think we're better to focus on their skills and their talents and their compassion rather than calling them heroes, but they're not immune from getting sick, and they do the best to keep others safe and they stay at home, and that does put significant pressure on our system. But what do you do about that? Well, you can make big promises and hope everybody forgets your record, or you can get on and lay down a budget as we did this year, $12 billion pandemic repair plan, 7,000 extra staff, and Gail will be delivering a whole bunch of them through TAFE. If we can get the migration issue dealt with, and if I could just for one moment, Bridget, before you wind me up, one of the first things I spoke to the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister, about was the fact that in the Home Affairs Department, on someone's desk, there's literally 100,000, tens of thousands certainly, it could be as many as 100,000 skilled visa applicants that are just, the answer is no. And there is massive backlog. At my urging, he's put, and others joined me in this, but I got to him on the Sunday, so I reckon I might have been one of the first ones in. He's put extra staff on to move through that backlog, and that'll be of such importance in health, and I'd say nowhere more so than in regional Victoria.
And just before we wrap up, I do have to ask, the new cabinet was sworn in yesterday. 3 of your ministers have already got COVID, not exactly the start you were hoping for.
Well, we wish them well, and they're doing the right thing, as so many hundreds of thousands of Victorians have. They've had symptoms, they've acted on those symptoms, they've got tested, they're staying at home, they're working from home, they'll still do their job as best they can. The easy thing to do is to kind of not act on your symptoms, and turn up at an event like this and finish up with more and more people with COVID, and that puts more pressure on our nurses, and none of us can do that. They're all fully vaccinated, they're all up to date, but these Omicron variants, they get past the vaccine to infect you, but the vaccine keeps you out of hospital in the vast, vast majority of cases. That's why if you haven't had a third dose, please get one. If you're eligible for a fourth, please do that. And while you're at it, talk to your GP. I'd ask you, I'm not telling you, I'd ask you to think about getting that free flu shot as well, because that's the other problem. Winter's always tough in health, but it's especially difficult when you've got so many staff sick, so many staff who are exhausted, and you've got flu and COVID. It's a little bit challenging. They're doing the right thing, and as so many hundreds of thousands of Victorians have, and they'll be back at work as soon as they can.
And now Stu's just going to come up for a final thank you, but thanks so much to the
Thank you all
Premier.
very much.